Este episodio de Word to Your Mama es patrocinado por McDonald's. Mira, no necesitamos otra razón para reunirnos en McDonald's, pero el crew sigue dándonos más. Recuerdo cuando era niña. No teníamos mucho, pero de vez en cuando alguien de la escuela tenía una fiesta de cumpleaños, lo celebraban en McDonald's y los crew members eran parte de nuestra comunidad. Es tu gente, tu comunidad y tu relación con el crew de McDonald's lo que hace que sea tu McDonald's. Todos tenemos un McDonald's especial. ¿Cuál es el tuyo? McDonald's. Me encanta. Hola, and welcome to episode 95 of Word to Your Mama. Word to Your Mama is a podcast about the life of a Latina mama, that's me, and the lives of my amazing multicultural tribe, a celebration of shared experiences navigating this dynamic world. There will be special guests, mad laughs, and absolutely no BS. Nah, B is our motto. Segments by the Supernatural Bear, that's my little man, he's 9 going on 49. But other than that, this podcast will be explicit. Please believe it. So why do I have a wide range of dope people in my circle? It's because I come from the industries of music, art, and now Web3. And having Barry of Podcast in Color on as a guest on this episode, starting off the month of September, is fitting in so many ways. The month of September is our anniversary month. That is correct. We started this 2 years ago during year one of the pandemic. I needed an outlet. Things were crazy. And so this was my third podcast. This is the one that I started solo. And then at the end of this month, it will be International Podcasting Day. So very fitting for sure. In this episode, we find out that Barry keeps it real at all times, why she started the largest directory of podcasts by people of color, if podcast has changed within the last 5 years, if so, how, and then you'll get a better sense as to why she is often referred to as one of the most innovative, strategic, and creative voices in our industry, and so much more. Now, I get a chance in this episode to thank Barry because when I started this journey with this podcast, it was an invaluable resource, being part of her directory, finding other podcasts, and then also all the gems that she drops on my timeline when she's in Twitter spaces, when she hosts her own Twitter spaces. So I get to give flowers to someone that has helped me tremendously in this third iteration of podcasts in my journey. So that's great. And, she's just a wealth of resource. She has such a positive light. And so, you get to learn a little bit more about Barry of Podcast in Color. And then don't forget, after that, we go into a super quick Supernatural Bear Corner. And he reports from the not-so-typical place today. He usually is in the studio, quote-unquote studio. But today, he's on location. And then after that, we have the outro. So, let's get into this. Barry, I'm so excited to see you. Like, I've only seen you once, and I only saw you once because it was on your Tip Top, aka TikTok. And I was like, there she is. That's what she looks like.
Yeah, I don't post me a lot. Yeah.
I know. That's why I was like, well, at least I kind of know what she looks like. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
And it's so great to find, I feel like I kind of know you. We kind of talk a little bit on the interwebs. So it's nice to finally, have a convo and get to know a little bit more about Barry. I'm sure so many people want to know so much about the one that keeps it real in the Twitter spaces. and online, if you will.
Well, I feel like I try. I feel like I'm that like in the spirit of people that talk about podcasting things. Like I'm just saying kind of what they're saying, but they're saying it in a corporate way, and I'm saying it in a way that's like, no, but this is how I feel like, and they're saying it in like the correct terms and like the softer way of like, this is how we should be going about it. And I'm like, nah, that seems like bullshit.
That's why I love you. That's why I love you so much. And I'm so super excited to have you. Okay, so let's start off by just how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, this world is this world. I feel like I'm surviving, so I feel like that's good at this point.
Right? So I think what you don't have to tell us where exactly where, but are you East Coast?
Oh no, I'm people. I would say, I guess it's Midwest. I'm in
Midwest.
Colorado. I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, oh,
So
oh.
most people like, picture the mountains and that sort of thing. I would say it's kind of desert. To me, it's more West Coast, but we have our own vibe. So it's just in the middle somewhere, in the middle, middle America. There we go, middle
Middle
America.
America. So how are things in Middle America? I mean, has there been a sense that there was a pandemic? Is it
Oh yeah.
different now, or it never changed, or I don't know how it was in
No.
in
It
Denver,
was,
Colorado.
I mean, it was deep here, of course. I feel like, different sides of town, took it more seriously than others or like dealt with it. But we're so spread out. Like,
Mm.
I just visited New York for 2 weeks and I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm so used to it's just like just so much more spread out and so much more space that the way like we're known as an outside place. So like you can always find a park, you can find people to play, whether that's adults or children. And so I think that like they dealt with it just getting even more outside than people were before.
Got
And
it.
like being more active. So we're an active place. So it more became more busy at parks and like farming and like places outside than anything else. But I mean, I, I'm survived. Like I feel like a good amount of people wore masks for a long time, and I was happy about that. I
Yeah.
understand what it is now, but I was just like, at least now I can go to the store at like 7 or 8 in the morning, and like everybody's not there like how it was before. It's only
Yes.
me and the other older people, and we're masked, and we're just trying to get in there and get out and like live life. So I'm like, now when I do my early shopping, everybody isn't out trying to get out there and do that anymore. Like most people have returned to their regular life. So I can be in the store from 7 to 8 and just kind of mosey along with other people.
I can relate to that so much as well. The one store that I have to go to that can't get delivered is Trader Joe's, and I remember back in the days in the first year, second year, they had at ours at least you had to be 65 and over to shop early in the morning, but now they lifted that, so now I can go and I'm with you. I'm like the youngest person there with the mask, with the other old, older gens, and like just getting in and getting out. And it's lovely now because everything's kind of back to normal in a way for others, but I can be as safe as, masking
As I
it.
want to be. Yes.
Exactly. Like, we're the
Spaced
we're the
out.
the unicorns, the last of a dying breed that's still
Yeah.
masking. And yeah, so
It's like still giving each other space and everything in the store. Like it's
exactly.
so respectful. When I'm in there in the middle of the day, it's just like it's a regular life. And I'm like, I mean, but you see, I have my mask on. So I think the respectful thing is to not be on my back. Like, come on.
Exactly. I don't need to feel your breath on my back, on the back of my neck. So Barry, I know you don't give out too much personal information. So what you feel comfortable? Where were you born and raised? Like, where did Barry grow up?
Oh, born and raised in Denver. That's where I am. So born and raised in Denver, Colorado, the metro area. That's where I've always grown up. I've lived here most of my life. I've just done a few years in college in Hampton, Virginia, and then I did a few years in Maryland and DC for a couple of years. But I've come back to Denver. Denver's my home. Like no matter where I move to for any amount of time, I feel like most likely I'll come back here.
Always home base, if you will.
It's home
Um,
base.
and so I wanted to also get into, what is your route? How did you know, get into podcasting and decide this is what I want to do? I want to if you want to start off by telling the folks what Podcast in Color is, and then what's your root? What got you there?
Well, Podcast in Color, it's a lot of things. It's a community for podcasters. And one, there's a website where there's a directory of podcasters in color all over the world. It's the largest directory that I know of at this point, and it's just to make sure people can find podcasts by people of color. Because mostly when you find podcasts, and it's usually by a white person, probably a white man, and those are the podcasts people, talk about if there's going to be chatter and things. So I just try to bring more to it and making sure people understand outside of entertainment, we are talking about other things and sharing stories and that sort of thing like that does exist. And the root of that is just being on Twitter and social media, the read, following them when they started their podcast. I listened to podcasts before that, working a night job, and I'll say like podcast, quote unquote, because there would be ESPN shows republished as podcast later. So I would kind of put that as a, asterisk when it's a TV show that's just republished the audio of the TV show. So, but the read with Kid Fear and Crystal on SoundCloud is really what got me into podcasts. And that's when I wanted to know about like the other people listening, because that's on SoundCloud, you can see the number of people that listened. And that made me look like I started looking at that number and talking to other people. Like, if I can see this many people are listening, where are they talking at? Are they talking to other people? I'm in Colorado. Are there other people in Colorado? And like, it's not up to the podcast to do that. Like some podcasts will do that, but really it's up to the fans to find themselves and figure out, how to group within themselves. So I kind of just started talking about the podcast that I was listening to online instead of keeping it to myself like many podcast listeners can do. And that brought more conversation and brought other people talking about it. Like, oh, I listened to this podcast. Oh, I like that also. And that kind of thing. So I've kind of created a community about that, and the listening to the read, how far they've come in there, like listening to their audio and what it sounds like, and then listening to a lot of other podcasts as they were being released. It became easier to pinpoint different issues people were having, even if they weren't having them. And that's where the Barry, most people know of like the social media side of podcasts and things like came about, where I'd be like, okay, people should be doing this, because if I'm listening to 30 or 40 podcasts, I can see the issue that these podcasts are doing this, not doing this, and these podcasts are, and that's why they're getting the response and growing and that sort of thing. And those are the kind of where podcast tips and more of the industry side of things have come about, because it's just like, if you have this information, I do think it would help you more in podcasting, not just like useless information or, there's so much news in a day, but it's like, if you know these things that I hope that that I know, I do think it'll help you in your journey of what you're trying to do in podcasting, whether you're trying to make money or not.
Yeah. So, I'll have links to everything that we discuss here, especially your links. And, everyone should definitely follow Barry and, see the directory, because, I've been listening to podcasts forever, and for, I don't know, 2000, like early 2000s. And I was listening to just white men. but things have changed, and I think especially when I decided to do this one, which is my third one, and to do it solo, and trying to find community and doing research. Like, you came up, your directory came up. I part of the directory. Thank you so much for that. And it was just great to see that because we don't get the podcasts of color don't really get to shine. You don't really see them on the front pages of like Apple or, the home pages of other, platforms. So I was wondering, since you started analyzing and collecting data and in listening till now, how do we think that the landscape of color, podcasts of color, has changed?
I think it's changed greatly. Like, they're talked about. You can find more people of color behind the scenes at places versus where it was, we'll say 5 years ago. So I'll go 5 years ago till now. The people behind the scenes have changed in many ways because of all the shifts and growing in podcast industry, where we have heads of audio, where I was saying, I wrote this conversation. I have so many things where I'm like, I need to do this, and I feel stunted because I haven't done a lot of things, but I'm like, we can have a head of audio conversation of people of like companies that are funded, like this is their full-time job,
Yes.
with women that are just people of color. And I was like, I don't know that we couldn't have done that 5 years ago. Maybe there would have been one. And I'm like, but you have Netflix, you have Christina Choi that just left Spotify to become a head of audio. You have I can't think of what his name is, but the guy that is directing Black Panther, the one that had that situation with the bank, Ryan Coogler.
Yes.
He has an audio company. An Asian woman is a head of audio there.
Nice.
There's just more than a few people that now are in the industry, have funding, and are hiring people that understand the job and aren't white
Yeah.
and bring more to the situation. And even like, and I like that it's like they're not even coming to just make POC podcasts. Like they're coming to make any kind of podcast that company is making. And I'm like, that's where we should be. It shouldn't just be like,
Yes.
okay, a Latin company starts, they just make Latin podcasts. No, they should be able to make podcasts about their full experience, and white people are in our experience in some way. So sometimes they're going to be a host or, a part of different things, but it's not just from their point of view. And that's what I want to see more of. It's just
Yes.
I look at that like there's no explanation. There's no like, sometimes to me when you come from the white point of view, everything that's POC is explained before the person does it. And I'm like, it can just kind of be like, if you're POC, you're like, dang, they explain this again. Like, or like, isn't that like something that's known or something like that? And I'm just like, some things people are gonna have to be like, okay, let me be interested enough to Google or look further into things. Like it's not gonna be explained to you on every program. And that's what I like about different voices being the head of things.
Yes, in positions of power to make decisions. They're just like, because
Yes.
they just happen to be like, oh, the head of this just happens to be of color. And
Yes.
you're right. That's where we need to be on all fronts. I think on all parts of entertainment. And I slowly see a shift, getting like just my tribe, the people that I've had on here, we started, 15, 20 years ago, just starting in the different entertainment industries. And now everyone's starting to, infiltrate and get into those areas. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I was wondering, how do you think we would be in the same place if we hadn't had 2 years of a pandemic? I feel like there was a shift, but I don't know if that's just me. Like, was there like more concentration or emphasis on the podcast?
The pandemic hurt podcasts actually more than it helped podcasts. Like I think that it became a thing. Like at the start of the pandemic, a lot of people were looking for content. Like I need to fill my day with things, but it tapered off. It became like, well, okay, I can start my day with silence. I don't need to feel as rushed because I'm just going into my living room. I'm not doing a lot, to get myself resettled, at a job or get my mind right after leaving the house. I'm not leaving the house. And I think that it hurt because the audience didn't necessarily increase at the same levels it was before the pandemic. And it put us into sharing space with streaming and TV as far as like the time you're listening or interacting. So it's like maybe somebody's going to turn off the TV and listen to a podcast versus somebody already kind of being out walking around after work, putting on a podcast and like, walking to the train or, walking to the car and sitting in the car for a minute or that kind of thing. And that like buy time that they wouldn't have even thought of turning on the TV, or maybe instead of doing this, I do that type of thing. And now we're in the place where it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that other thing. So I'll listen to the radio or a podcast and that kind of thing. So it just feels like more of a competition because of the pandemic for me versus us coming out on top. But I do think we have a better chance because people know what podcasting is. I think more people know what podcasting is.
Yes.
And as we get back to whatever post-pandemic life is, to be something more people work into their lives. And when they see a story, they're like, oh, that's a podcast? I'll listen to that. It just becomes a little bit more of an easier thing. Like I like Dateline. Everybody's always talking about someday. I can't think of what the podcast, something about Pam or something like that. Everybody's always talking about this podcast. And I was like, it just brings people in. If you were a Dateline person, Dateline got you to listen to the podcast on the podcast app. And now you're like, oh, I heard about that other true crime or something podcast. I might be able to figure out where that is. And go look at that. Whereas versus before, when people just didn't know, and you still be saying, what is a podcast? Everything started with was, what is a podcast? What is a podcast? And now it's more like, these are the podcasts that are about different things to try to bring you in to not just one podcast, but more podcasts. So to me,
Yeah,
that's what's
that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And then, so where do you usually listen to podcasts? Doing different activities? Like, what's your podcast hearing situation?
It's more wherever my mind is. I mean, due to the pandemic and COVID, I feel like most people at this point have experienced grief, or someone passing or
Yes.
getting sick and that kind of thing. And this year that was kind of heavy for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't listen to a lot of podcasts early in the year. Like it would be strainful for me. It was easier for me to
Mm-hmm.
listen to music, and connect with music and that kind of thing. It felt like people's live thoughts were too much. And it'd be like they
Mm.
would start talking about political or something, and I'd be like, it's too much. Or like they
Yes.
would just do
Yes.
things to trigger me. And I would just be like, it's so much easier to listen to something that I know is like trying to comfort me more than
Yes.
like antagonize or do something else. So but I listen to podcasts. I would say it just mostly depends on my mood. Like if I get up and I'm up early and I'm like, you know what? Oh, let me just press play on Recode and hear what Cara and them have to say. If I like it, maybe I'll get 10 minutes into it. If Scott says something to them, I'm like, let me go on to the next thing. But it's kind of like, okay, am I in the mood for sports or storytelling? Am I going to look for, maybe a 5 series episode thing because I need to maybe do some work or like try to focus my mind on something so I won't jump all around from podcast to podcast. I'll listen to a series, and I'm trying to work out the way I work out listening, the way I'm listening to podcasts to the way other people might interact with podcasts, because of that, because of grief, because of politics. I don't like it when people talk about certain things. I'm like, skip, skip, skip. Wish you could have put a thing on here saying you talked about this. I would have never pressed play. I'm like, I'm trying to do those kind of things, especially coming into the election time of year
Oh yeah.
and trying to pump up and do the things that I'm supposed to do in my newsletter. But I was like, I want to pay respect to people like me that are like, I'm tuned in. I know enough. I don't need other people to complain about this all day
Yeah.
on other types of things. And I still want to know about things and interesting things that people are making. And I'm like, those are the kind of things I want to focus on and show, like the everydayness and talking about, the news type of thing is going to be a thing. But like, we're getting some really good stories. And when you put out a
Mm.
series that's 5 or 6 episodes, you only really promoted it during then you have to move on to your next project or, your next thing and that kind of thing. But I'm like, I want to go back and talk about like, okay, last year, maybe these 3 series were released and there are 5 or 6 episodes. So if you're into that and you want a story to kind of take you in for the day or like through the week, like this is what I'm going to listen to. Maybe you're looking for this and that will draw you more into podcasting and looking for other stories like that. I think we're doing a good job of making podcasts, interesting podcasts. I'm not sure we're doing a great job on saying what the content is. This is how you find it. And this is how long it is. Like a series will start and I'll be like, is it 8 episodes? Is it 10 episodes? Like it's so many
Mm.
questions. And I'm like, if I have that and I'm deep in here, I know somebody new would just be like, well, how many times am I going to have to listen? Or when is the story like coming to a conclusion or telling me something different? If it was on TV, I would know this is a 10 episode series. You'd be saying every time it started. I'm just trying to think about the deeper information and bringing new audience members in always, and just how maybe even consistent audience members, because I've talked to a lot of friends and they don't listen to as many podcasts. So I'm like, okay, what will bring that person back in? What is that person kind of looking for? If they're not looking for pop culture anymore, if they stop watching that TV show and their podcasts are based off that TV show, what will kind of be next to bring them in, to more
Mm.
things?
I wanted to know why some people who get COVID-19 get it so bad. I found out it may be because they have a high risk factor, such as heart disease, diabetes, being overweight, smoking, and asthma. Even if symptoms feel mild, these factors can increase your risk of COVID-19 turning severe. So if you're at high risk and test positive, there are things you can do, like asking your healthcare provider if an authorized oral treatment is right for you. Learn about an option at treatcovid19.com. This message is sponsored by Pfizer.
Cox sabe que tu familia no para. Por eso ofrece nuevos paquetes de Internet que te brindan la misma velocidad y flexibilidad que esperas de Cox. Además, Panoramic Wi-Fi está incluido en algunos planes sin costo adicional. Es Internet que sigue tu ritmo. todo sin contrato anual, que significa que no hay molestos cargos por terminación anticipada. Desconéctate de tu rutina, pero no de tu Wi-Fi cuando estás fuera de casa. Cox te da acceso a más de 3 millones de hotspots de Wi-Fi. Después de un largo día, reúnen la familia para una noche de películas con Contour Stream Player. Disfruta de deportes en vivo, tus programas favoritos en Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus y más con apps de streaming populares. Conoce más en cox.com/español. Here's a question. What have you always wanted to try? It could be something small, like trying a new dish, or something big, like trying a completely new career path. What about trying something to ignite new passions or rekindle old ones? Even though I was part of other podcasts before, I've always wanted to try hosting my own, hence Word to Your Mama. You're listening to it right now. It's been one of the best new things I have tried. I get to share some amazing, diverse voices from all walks of life with the world, and that just fills my soul with good vibes. So think about it. What have you always wanted to try? Anything is possible when you set your mind to try something else. Gold Peak Real Brewed Tea is here to unleash your thirst for trying. So take this as your sign to say yes. Opt in. Go for it. Because trying is what life is all about. Try Gold Peak Real Brewed Tea and then try something else. That makes sense. So you don't have one that you're like that's weekly that you've been with since jump, and you tell yourself when is it coming out?
The read pause this year, it threw me off into a different type of listening thing, because they were the ones that would be like, I'm basically refreshing my app for them to drop. And then once they dropped, like, it was like my day could get started. That was what started my week. Like, whatever day they dropped, that was my Monday. But like, once they stopped dropping because of the mental health of one of the hosts, it threw me off in a way of that I was like, there's no podcast I need to listen to the day it drops, because if I don't listen, it might be spoiled for me, or something's going to happen or something like that. Nothing is really happening like that. Nothing is happening. So I was just like, I don't really need to. I'm not missing anything if I don't listen to a podcast within the first hour. So it more or less is like, okay, I'm in the mood to listen to podcasts. Let me see what's been published this week or within the last few days that I haven't, pressed play on that kind of thing. But there's no podcast right now where I'm like waiting for it to drop. And most podcasts, a few podcasts that I started liking, like when For Colored Nerds came back, they published like in the afternoon or evening or something. That's an irritating time for me. But I'm a person that wants to open my app in the morning and see the podcast that came in at 4 a.m., at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m. I don't know. It's like a freshness to the day. Like, oh, okay, you published, exactly for me to start pressing play and for me to start my day this way, instead of me having to scroll back and be like, oh, something came last night. Like, I thought the podcast I listened to, or, had already figured out that. So I'm just like, it's, different people are publishing at different times, and they're playing with that. And I'm just like, I kind of wish more people did that. And I've tried to not be as obsessive, because a lot of people, because of the pandemic and COVID, will just stop podcasting, or, have to take a pause, or, there's just other things to it. And I found that the first year of COVID, it was December, I felt very emotional when a podcast didn't publish. And I was like, okay, but should you feel this deeply? Like, should it be affecting your day like this, that a podcast that you really like, didn't publish on the day that they were going to publish because of other things? And I'm like, it just felt like I didn't have that much to look forward to. Yes. So the only things I really had were the podcasts that were still publishing on a consistent basis and going with their schedules. When they didn't do that, I was like, that podcast will never know that they had me in tears behind. And I was like, but you need to create a separation. So it kind of like, after the read did that earlier this year, I was like, it kind of came to a thing of like, that's what I was doing already, is trying to create a separation of like, I don't feel so personal about some of these things. And that's just kind of the way COVID made things. It's just like something to look forward to, something that's still coming, something that's still things that I like, just my anxiety started to do. So I was like, I need to create better boundaries again, and understand that this is happening and seeing it. So I've kind of separated myself from podcasts in that way, because it just would feel like if this podcast isn't doing well, like it's almost not, it feels like I'm only one audience member, but it's on me to bring more people in. And it's so deep. So,
the pressure.
The pressure. Like, oh my God, this podcast has to survive. I'm trying to create better boundaries around that. I do have anxiety that I put on other people. So I'm like, now I don't do that. There's nothing I really look forward to, like, or I'm like, if they publish or if they don't publish, it's gonna, take over my week. It's like, there's always more podcasts. That's a phrase I've been telling myself. There's always more podcasts. I have more than enough podcasts to listen to. I'm behind on many podcasts that I would like to listen to, or like things that I've been like, I'm saying I'm going to check out. I'm going to check out, something new that started that I just needed to listen to before I put in my feed. So I'm like, I need to respect that I'm always saying I have something to listen to and listen to some more things instead of the comfortable way I was before. So that's what I'm coming out of now, and listening to more podcasts, probably one or two new ones a week, and just seeing what's out there.
Nice. And along the lines of some things that you mentioned, what are some other pet peeves that podcasters, do or don't do?
I think at this point in the game, it's more frustrating to me that people act like help isn't out there, or that like people aren't willing to help, and that there aren't a lot of people doing the same exact thing that aren't trying to find community around it. And so to me, sometimes it can be like, but what are you looking for? Are you looking for something specific? Because it exists. So like, what exactly can't you name that maybe you're looking for that you feel isn't there, or you feel like it maybe costs more than you would want it to cost, and that kind of thing. But I'm like, there's also an education gap, because I'm like, if I ask the average podcaster, do they know different programs exist? Do they? Not really. And if they did, maybe, but they didn't understand it was something they could have paid $80 to be a part of, and it would have brought so much more, worth to them and what they're doing, even if they weren't making money, but just more confidence and like community around the things they kind of hope to do, or maybe a series they hope to put together or something in the future. And so that's the kind of thing I get down on myself about, because I'm like, okay, you're the kind of person that's the middle person. Like, to what everybody else does, you're very much a middle person that's talking to both sides of the aisle, like the podcaster and the audience and that kind of thing. But you talk to the podcaster so they'll connect with the audience more. And I'm like, I feel like I should be telling more podcasters about the programs that they, could get, the money being worth it versus not worth it. Like, sometimes when you see 2,000 or 3,000, there's also still programs like Twyla has that will pay if you want to be a part of different awards. So you can, if they're like, it's $75 to apply for this award, they'll give you $75 back if you do those kind of things. And I'm like, there's so much information that I wish that I'm like, every day I could just beat you with, like, you do know you can do this, you do know this is this, you do know this is out here. And then I'm at the audience like, you know these podcasts exist, you do know this exists, you know the one, like, there's technology podcasts, there's probably something on makeup you're looking for. Are you really into astrology? Because you can't listen to somebody probably talking about that really understands it and is like deep in it, not even somebody that just picked up a book, but like, and I'm just and I'm like, it's just so deep for me, because somebody will say something, I'm like, oh God, you have to focus on what you're focused on, because you'll stop and like turn to a whole different thing because that person needs something. So it's, for me, my mind is just so all over the place that I have to like bring it back to where it should be. And I think like grief and other things that just like stirred me up and put me into other anxiety filled things. So I'm really just coming back to a place where I feel more me, more like I can get more of my thoughts out, and like I'm putting them out. And I'm like, okay, one day I'll put the newsletter out, but I have been putting my thoughts to like, there's already newsletters that'll come, but I'm like, is it 2 newsletters? Do I just have enough newsletters for the rest of the year? And I like, my mind is like, okay, well, at some point you're just gonna have to put something out though. Like you can't just keep stacking information and all these things that you're doing. That's just saying you're gonna do. So it's just, for me, there's a lot. I'm like, I'm an in-between person, but I do know I want to make sure that I'm helpful and that people understand there's more out there, because I feel so alone. And so like, nobody's helping me and nobody's telling me this, or nobody's answering this, showing the truth. And I'm like, no, it's out there. Sometimes you just have to look a little bit further. And most people, when they're deep into the work, don't have necessary time to
Yeah.
market you to find them. Like, they're just like, you're going to have to put some effort in to find me. Like, I'm doing the work. Maybe I have 5 minutes to talk or do something like that, but you are going to have to look for me. I can't be looking for everybody.
No,
I
for
try to be the
sure.
in-between person so that people understand the world is existing bigger than what they're thinking it is. And when they can get to that, it can kind of become an easier place of like, there's just more things to do than what you're doing. And everybody usually thinks they're doing enough. And it's like, rarely are we.
I know there's so much more to do and so much more information to learn. And it, and I know you were dealing with a lot, but I just want to say we did miss you, being on the timeline and chiming in. So to have you, back on and in the spaces and tweeting and everything and sharing everything. And you're so generous and so, just felt so helpful, just sharing your knowledge and, not really asking for much, which hopefully that changes for you. But, I just feel like I've learned so much just in the little time that I started following you and interacting and, being in your spaces or being in Twyla spaces. And then you're always a speaker and guys have a lot of stuff that you guys share. So thank you for that. So let's get into the questions and comments from the audience.
Okay.
This person says, she is one of the most innovative, strategic, and creative voices in our industry. She sees 10 steps ahead of us all. We'd be a better industry if more of us did what she told us to do. And this is from founder and CEO of Matriarch Digital Media, Twyla.
Love Twyla.
It goes to, this is perfect because it goes to everything you've been just talking about right now, right? Like there's so many things. And she says the same thing. You're 10 steps ahead of all of us, and we'd be better if we just did exactly what you told it. Like you're giving it to us. We just need to do it. So, yeah. And Twyla, her space that happens, once a month?
Yeah.
Once a month.
The second Sunday of every month. Yeah.
That is the amount of gems that are dropped in those spaces by her, by you, and by other people that come up. I mean, I've been trying to tell any of my podcasting people, like, you need to be in this space. Like, this is like quality stuff. Like, I have a reminder, whenever the Twitter space, I could set the reminder, and then, yeah, that's just gold. Both of you guys are gems and are helping all of us so much.
And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure our voices are out there, but also make sure people know other voices are out there, because sometimes we can be so behind the scenes. If you know each other, it's like you have your friend groups and things like that. But for the people that don't have that or haven't, created those things, it's like, how do I find those people? So that's why I like doing spaces. And I know she likes doing spaces, to be able to be like, we exist. There's more people out here. Mm-hmm. And, just to kind of look at that, you can look at her follow list, the people that follow her, all of those kind of things. It's like the world is bigger than what you think it is once you find something like that. So it just kind of brings more people to the thing, like, oh, okay, there's other people out here actively doing this, talking about this, wanting to be in this. I'm not alone. And it's a reminder, I hope, for other people that, like, it's a big growth space.
Yes, and I love it. And as women in podcasting, I mean, all of us getting together and sharing information, it's wonderful. I saw Headliner real quick, didn't dive deep. Then I tried something else, discussed it on the Twitter space. You guys kind of broke it down a little bit. So it made me go back to Headliner and investigate, go a little deeper. And then I left the other joint and now I'm, you know what I mean? It's just like getting information and seeing, you just having a little bit more context to certain things, apps.
It's how people use things. Like, yeah. I've very much, my submission process is how I found out people use Canva to create smart links. And I was like, what is this link? And like trying to figure it out. And like going backwards, I was like, okay, it was created in Canva and they just put the links in and things. So I'm like, you learn so much just talking to other people and seeing how they use something else, which is why I ask the questions I ask sometimes to people. Cause I'm like, I want to know how you use something because it's not necessarily maybe how I use it. So I'm learning more or seeing something else or like
Exactly.
buttons I don't normally push or something. Like, no, you should
Yeah,
be doing it this way. And it's like a whole different experience on how you might experience something.
definitely. So thank you so much for that. So, okay, so now it's time for the not so rapid fire questions, the slow as hell questions. Barry, are you ready?
Okay.
3 words to describe yourself.
Oh gosh. Creative,
Uh-huh.
fun,
Mhm.
in my head all the time.
Okay, next one. What's the best piece of advice you received?
Oh, I think that's hard. The best, I think more the advice that's more not somebody trying to tell me something to do, but somebody just trying to say, here are options of things I think you could be doing has
Mm,
helped me because it's not like they're trying to say, this is exactly where you should be, because I usually don't see things that way, but it's like, do you see the option to do these things? And it's like, oh, okay, maybe I don't see it that way, but maybe I could do this or incorporate more of this into what I'm doing or something like
mm,
that. So I am more of a person like, this is like, you can expose me to something. I just don't need you to kind of try to think for me. Just expose me to it. If it's supposed to be, it'll be. And maybe that'll come later, to the thing.
that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. The next one. Song that you play on the regular to get you hyped when you need it.
Ooh. I love Megan Thee Stallion.
Mm,
And usually it's gonna be one of her songs. I like going to her top 5 on Spotify. But I like her like Sweet as Pie. It's a pop song, but it's something easily to dance to. Like you can put it on, it's not asking too much, and you can kind of change your mood with it. My cousin taught me to do this thing that I don't know, early in life where like if we were in a bad mood or like there was just too much going on, we put on a song or two, dance to it, and just change our mood for the day. So
mm,
like that's a thing that I'm used to doing. Is just like, okay, let me find some upbeat music, something that's really cool to do that. Sometimes I can do an R&B song, like belting out a song. It'd just kind of be fun. Like Summer Walker has this song called Session 32 that's just kind of fun. And it's just like something you can just sing like and feel passionate about. Like, okay, I can get that out. But mostly it's probably going to be like Megan, I think it's Megan's piano. She has a thing where she starts it with her piano, but I love her energy. Like it just makes me feel like I'm at a concert right away. And of course, right now I'm listening to Beyonce, like that's big. But I feel like Megan, usually I can find a song by her that'll get the party started.
amazing. And as always, we will add that to the Word to Your Mama guest list playlist, songs playlist. And we always put the latest one at the top of the list. And this is the first time, actually, I believe to be true, that it's the first time we're adding Meg Thee Stallion on there. And we have everything from like the craziest things you would think of to, all genres on this playlist. So we'll be adding that, and there'll definitely be a link to that in our show notes. And last but not least, Barry, what will be your legacy?
I think about that a lot because I think that a person has to work on building their legacy. They shouldn't just be working and think other people are going to put it together.
Mm,
So I just hope that what people are taking from me and my intention is that I hope to help. And
mm,
I hope that I can share enough information that people can help others. Like, even if I left the space or something, like it's enough that you can say, I learned enough that I can take the different things that I learned from her and like the spaces she exposed me to and take this on and give it to other people and help them and that kind of thing. So that'd be my hope, that they'd be like, she helped enough that I can take this on and do it. I don't necessarily need her to be there all the time.
amazing. And I could say for myself, as I mentioned before, just already you've helped me tremendously, significantly, and I want to thank you. So this is awesome that you're on here, that I get to speak with you and learn more about you, because that is your legacy now. Like, you've helped so many people. I know I'm not the only one. I know people are listening to this, especially those that have been in the Twitter spaces and are saying, they're like shaking their head. They're saying, yep, yes, of course. Da, 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 da. I agree. I concur. So thank you so much. Before we leave, what are a couple of, pieces of advice you could give to anyone that's starting a podcast?
I would say to look at Third Coast Podcast Conference Festival, whatever it is. If you put that in, you'll find it. But they have a lot to offer, as their conference sessions are on their website, but also different pieces of audio are on their website from people that have made audio from beginning, from professional, and that kind of thing. So listening to other people's audio, especially when you can just do a 5 or 6 minute clip that somebody put a lot of intention into, is really big to me, especially on headphones and just trying to see all what they did with it. It can just kind of bring more to the space. I would say you're going to always want to follow some other people that talk about podcasting, even if it's some other people either talk about podcasting or the subject you podcast on. And that's just something, because I'm a person that has separate social media from my personal and my podcast stuff. But I'm very much like, on my podcast account, I'm going to talk about podcasting things. So if you end up having one account or anything like that, making sure you're following people that are talking about those kind of things. So you'll talk about your subject base even when you're not thinking about it. And that's not something people think on social media. Like, they get on social media and do their usual thing. And it's like, but also bring attention to the thing that you want to. So I separated my accounts so I don't have to, like, people don't have to be like, oh, okay, she stopped talking about Meg Thee Stallion, she's talking about podcasts again. It's just like, I just come over here to talk about podcasts. Maybe I mention music and stuff, within that, because I do want to hear from artists on podcasts and stuff like that. But most of the time I'm like, I just want to have directed spaces where I talked about the different things, and you don't have to be in the whole world. So I would say, that'd be my last piece. If you can, to separate the accounts. It seems like a lot, but I think about it in the way of, we all think about, we hope to grow in social media. We hope to grow our projects, even if they, become different things over time. And having the space to be able to have your personal life and the thing you're working on different, so you can take breaks if you want to. You can, have different mental things or family things and stuff like that happen, and your audience for the thing that they're doing doesn't have to read all that or just, be in all that. It, to me, just brings more of it makes it easier to be a part of social media and not leave it because one thing is happening in one space. Like, if something's happened with the podcast, you don't want to be hearing about it, and you're like, that's what all people will talk to me about and things like that. So creating boundaries online within different social media accounts, it can seem like, oh, that's a lot of work, but also it can be a lot of peace. So think about the peace.
Think about the peace. Thank you so much, Barry. Let the people know. I'll have it in the show notes, but let them know verbally where they can find you.
Podcast with an S in color. If you search that on Google or wherever you use the internet search, I know people are doing different things now. You'll find me. But I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram and Facebook I probably use the least, but we'll see how that goes soon. More TikToks to come soon. I was about to come back about a month ago, but then I was just like, let me figure out what the podcasting space looks like, since I took a break, and like the different people that are giving advice and things like that. So I don't come in here and look like I'm copying or doing other things, and always try to keep what I'm doing, what I do. So I'll be back soon, but I can see more of what I want to be doing on there. So I'm excited. I'm excited about what I'm about to be doing. It doesn't feel like as pressure as I felt this spring to come back. Now I can it's just okay. I can do it. It doesn't feel, you have the stuff. It's not like you don't have it or there's other stuff going on. Just do it.
Well, I'm excited. I know a lot of us are excited to see what you're going to be sharing, all the gems you're going to be sharing. So thank you so much. And thank you again for being on here, Barry. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking me and waiting for as long as you did.
I'm just glad it happened. Thank you.
No problem. Nice seeing you.
And now introducing
the Supernatural Bear Corner. Supernatural Bear.
Hello everyone, I'm the Supernatural Bear, coming to you live from my kitchen. I just wanted to say, for this artist, number one, I have a bear that's literally called Barry that I sleep with every night. Don't judge, okay? I'm only 9, almost 10, okay? I'm still a child. But yeah, I just wanted to say how important it is to just know and recognize that there are many amazing Black and Brown podcasts, such as this one. Check the other episodes out. But anyways, yes, this has been SMB signing off. Bye!
Shooby-doo. Yeah. There you have it, folks. That's episode 95 of Word to Your Mama with Barry of Podcasts in Color. She's a gem. She's a gem. Whether you're a veteran in the scene or you're new, I highly suggest that you follow her on all socials and definitely make sure to join her next Twitter space because she's always, abreast of all the latest stuff. And the way she analyzes it, I feel it's very unique because she sees it as a consumer, as a creator, and all around. And she doesn't just stick to one genre. So I think she really gets some deep insight. And if you are a Patreon patron, make sure to check your inbox because I think about a month ago now, we sent a little special something for you guys. And if you want to become a Patreon patron to support, there's a link on the site. There's probably a link in the show notes on how to do that. Another way to support is you can buy us a whiskey via buy us a coffee link. And then also we have the online store. You got enamel pins designed by myself and the Supernatural Bear. You got t-shirts in English and Spanglish. So many different things. And there's a couple of free ways that you can support us. You can leave us a review. You can put 5 stars all the way to the end on all the different platforms. And another way is tell your folks, tell your peeps, and tell your friends. Please believe it. I just got back last week from Bogota, Colombia with Hola Metaverso. We'll get into that. Little sneak peek. There's something that has been a nightmare. And it happened to me twice in Bogota, and it involved the elevator. Please believe it. So much so that I discussed it with my therapist when I got back this week for my monthly therapy sessions. Yes. So if you want to reach out to us, you can DM us. You can send us an email via hola@wordtoyourmama.com. And thank you for the continued support. And as always, we reap. Word to Your Mama is owned and produced by Ritzy P. Intro beat produced by Nico Beats. If you want to know more, you want to email us, you want to get the media kit, go head over to wordtoyourmama.com. Word to Your Mama is now part of the Latina Podcasters Network. And as always, Word to Your Mama is brought to you by ritzyperiwinkle.com.